Good afternoon, everybody. We will start the webinar in a couple of minutes' time. So good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining the How Cambridge University Press Automates SAP Workloads on AWS webinar. My name is Adam Hill. I'm a SAP Specialist Solution Architect at AWS, and this afternoon I'm joined by Ben Lingwood from Lemongrass and Ian Cavey from Cambridge University Press. We will allow time at the end of this webinar for some question and answers. So if you have any questions, please type those into the questions part of the webinar. And for those of you who are interested, we have uploaded the case study that we're discussing today in the handout section. So before I hand over to Ben, I will just spend a few moments talking about SAP on AWS. So why AWS for SAP? Well, firstly, we are the complete cloud for business innovation. So the breadth and depth of our services help remove those barriers such as the risk, cost, and complexity of integrating new technologies with SAP workloads. Our AWS platform helps customers provision the infrastructure faster and with less risk than using traditional on-premise hardware, and enables those new business models that were previously not feasible on-premise. We also have cost effectivity. So you can run your SAP AWS workloads to reduce the cost of ownership. With AWS, you have access to low-cost infrastructure that you can provision in a matter of minutes on demand, helping remove those overheads associated with the hardware maintenance. AWS's pay-as-you-go pricing model gives you the ability to pay for the capacity you need when you need it. Then we move on to security and compliance. Running your SAP workloads on AWS helps you meet the strict regulatory requirements and strengthen your security posture. AWS is designed to help customers comply with a wide variety of regulatory and industry-specific requirements, including HIPAA, PCI, ISO, SOC, and many more. AWS has dozens of assurance programs designed to help customers meet these regulatory requirements and assess whether they remain contractually compliant and stay audit ready. And then finally, certified and supported. SAP have certified AWS for running production workloads for the breadth and depth of SAP applications, platforms, and databases. Many enterprises have now migrated their SAP production workloads to AWS and are seeing those improved business benefits and efficiency as part of that move. AWS offers a portfolio of migration services that enables you to assess your on-premise environment, migrate massive amounts of data to the cloud quickly and cost effectively, and minimizes the downtime during migration. If we look at the enterprise customers currently running SAP on AWS, we have thousands of customers and hundreds of these customers running productive workloads. Customers including BP, Kellogg's, and others. Then if we move, if we move on to the SAP and AWS Alliance, we've been working with SAP as a customer since 2008. And SAP have trusted AWS to run its own workloads, leveraging our scalability, agility, and cost effectiveness for supporting their own use cases. Since 2011, we've been working with SAP as a technology partnership and certifying the broad range of SAP products to run on top of AWS. In 2016, we started work on launching the SAP HANA appliances on AWS, and that culminated with the X132 platform with 2 terabytes of memory. In late 2016, we launched Scale Out up to 14 terabytes, 7 nodes. And then in 2017, we moved on to launching the larger X132E 4 terabytes scale up and support for Scale Out up to 17 nodes, 34 terabytes. And then finally, in 2017, we announced support for even larger on-demand scale-out clusters with up to support for 50 terabytes, that's 25 nodes. And then in 2018, the pace of innovation continued, and we launched our high-memory EC2 bare metal instances supporting 6, 9, and 12 terabytes of memory for scale-up. And I'll talk a little bit more about this later on. We also launched the latest generations of our M5 and C5 instances for SAP based on the Nitro platform. And again, I'll talk about this in a little bit more detail. Then we look at the AWS global footprint. Currently, we have 18 regions as of August 2018, 4 more regions planned for later this year. Across those regions, we have 55 availability zones worldwide and 12 more availability zones planned for later this year. This enables you as a customer to choose which region you want to deploy your mission-critical SAP workloads. Then if we move on to the resources we have to support you as a customer, we have a number of white papers, blog posts, FAQs, and infrastructure pricing estimates to help you on that journey of moving your SAP workloads to AWS. And then specifically for HANA and NetWeaver on HANA, we have our quick start guides, which enable you to rapidly deploy a fully certified HANA environment in under an hour. And then moving on to the Rapid Migration Test program. We worked in conjunction with SAP at the beginning of 2017 to enhance the DMO, the database migration option tooling, to support not only the migration to HANA, but also support the migration to cloud in the same step. This enables customers to move from any DB to HANA or actually ASE in a very simple, straightforward process. This has enabled customers to very quickly understand what benefit moving to SAP HANA can bring to their business. And then moving on, we have the AWS Partner Network. Now, within the Partner Network, we have tens of thousands of partners, SIs and GSIs. And a number of these partners hold the SAP competency on AWS. That competency consists of consulting services, so migrations for SAP onto AWS, HANA migrations, as well as managed services. And you'll hear about from one of our partners today, Lemongrass. So let's move on to EC2 instances certified for SAP. So we actually have over 42 instances certified across the different range of EC2 instance families we have, so the current generations and previous generations. You'll see on this slide, we've highlighted in blue the latest generations, so the M5, C5, and the EC2 bare metal design for large-scale HANA instances. So first of all, let's look at the latest generation of C5 and M5. So these are built around the Intel Skylake processor, have larger vCPU count and memory counts to previous generations. They're powered by a Nitro platform, which has enabled us to improve the efficiency of the underlying hardware, and therefore you'll see that the M5 provides 19% more SAPs per CPU over the M4, and the C5 provides 26% more SAPs per CPU over the C4. And these are actually done at a lower cost per hour rate over the other two. They're all SAP certified, and all these details are listed in the OSS note that we provide with SAP. Then if we move on to HANA, as I mentioned before, we're currently certified up to 4 terabytes scale up and 50 terabytes scale out. These are virtual appliances built on Intel technology, fully certified with an on-demand pay-as-you-use model, flexibility to change size of instance, scalability to scale out as you need it, offering the lowest TCO. And then if we move on to what we announced at Sapphire this year. So based on customer feedback, we heard customers needed larger than 4 terabytes. So we announced at Sapphire to be launched later this year, our new EC2 bare metal instances, again built around the Nitro platform. These instances will come in 6, 9 and 12 terabyte scale up sizes. They will use the same APIs as the virtual machines. They will use the same storage, EBS, and the same backend. This means that the investment you have made in the current APIs and automation for the virtual appliances will equally apply to the bare metal appliances. So these EC2 bare metal instances will have seamless access to all the AWS services in the same way as the virtual machines do. So on that note, I will now hand over to Ben Lingwood, CTO of Lemongrass.
Thank you, Adam, and good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. And thank you for making the time to come on. So a quick introduction to Lemongrass, who we are and what we do. Then we'll be hearing from Ian before we just circle back at the end and actually show you some of the automation capabilities that we have. So if I just start off with an introduction as to who Lemongrass are. Here we go. So we're an organization that's actually been in place for 10 years and has actually been a pioneering organization driving the automation of SAP onto AWS. And specifically, we were the first organization ever to take an SAP solution live on Amazon back in 2015. So we're an organization built of just 150 people, but we've moved over 1,600 systems to date. And the reason that we do that is we are an automation-driven organization. We don't like doing things manually. We don't like repetitive tasks. Hence, we automate wherever possible, leveraging the platform innovation that sits within the Amazon platform, bringing that together. If we move on and look from a geographical perspective, we operate globally. So we have delivery organizations running through all major time zones. We have run organizations sitting from Kuala Lumpur down to South Africa, down to Argentina, and actually product development organizations throughout the globe as well. And as such, our organizations tend to be large global organizations. We're able to provide 24/7 support globally. And again, carrying on the mantra of automation, we're able to run these large organizations with very few people simply because we drive for automation. Systems are self-healing, they're self-automating when it comes to things like scaling, and self-provisioning where required as well with auto-scaling. So let's look at some of the organizations that we've helped go through this automation journey. Just pick on a few here out of interest. So if we look, for example, at the Compass Group, so that's an organization we took live only this summer, moving 250,000 payroll solutions that went live in just 4 hours. Again, that's only possible with automated procedures. If we look at Britvic, a large drinks organization based in the UK, again, very large non-SAP estate, which was costing an awful lot of money for run and operate, support and patching. And again, driving automation where non-production systems can be built on demand, literally a few hours before they're required, meant they could hugely reduce their estate and actually the amount of people they needed to support, run and operate systems. Moving across to Seco. So Seco were actually the first organization that ever went live, the one I referenced earlier. Good story with Seco in that they actually moved their head of operations from London to Singapore. And again, due to automation, we were able to completely move the data center and the operations between the two data centers in just 1 day's downtime. So it gives a little bit of an overview about why even these large organizations are looking at Amazon and specifically looking at the Lemongrass technology, driving the automation to optimize the cost of running SAP within their estate. Now, what we typically see, just through our experience, is customers tend to move in typically 5 waves. So the first wave is really moving onto Amazon in the first place. Why do customers do that? Now, typically they do that because there's a burning platform, maybe they need to get out of a data center, or maybe they desperately need to get onto the next version of technology, maybe move to x86 onto more optimized hardware, maybe they're running Big Iron historically, maybe there's a performance issue, or down to simple things like it's actually cheaper to move onto an SAP database. If you're not aware, SAP are changing the general support rules around non-SAP database licensing, which kicks in 2025. So for that instance, a lot of organizations are actually having a cost positive move just on the maintenance move alone of moving over to an SAP database. So that really gets organizations onto the cloud, able, as we've mentioned earlier, to use systems when they need them, turn them off when they don't, orchestrate them when they do, and drives that ability. That then leads to the second wave that we see, where you can start to really benefit some of the deeper automation capabilities. So things like DevOps, so creating, copying, refreshing, automating systems on demand really can release a lot of value into an organization. And as we see, reduce a large amount of the SAP estate typically. It's not unusual in a lot of our customers for 40, 50% to be taken out of the operating cost simply because large landscapes simply don't need to be maintained. That then extends into FinOps, finance operations. So again, we can automate the way billing is coming through. So billing is calculated on a minute-by-minute basis, and that visibility is up in a dashboard. So customers really have complete control in what systems are on, what systems are off, and how those systems are being billed down to the minute. So once the operational pain has gone, once the platform agility is in place, the customers can start leveraging that. That then frees up time, budget, and money to start looking at innovation. And what we tend to see then, once that stabilizes, customers can then start to explore that migration to new technologies. So technologies like SAP's S for HANA or C for HANA, or some of the other new transformation programs coming out from SAP's S4 release wave, it drives the ability to start looking at digital transformation through new versions, because more time, money, and budget can be spent on those solutions rather than focusing on keeping the lights on. We then send the later waves in wave 4 and 5. Organizations then start to look at the wider picture. It's almost zoom out from SAP, look at your overall enterprise landscape, and you can start to look at enterprise topics such as data lakes. So is it more cost effective to pull data out into a data lake model? Can you mine that data for more information and more value to be able to get more information out of your enterprise ERP systems and start running data analysis on that? Or maybe even start looking at artificial intelligence, as some of the customers have started to do. So it's an iterative cycle as customers go through that. So to complement that, we have a range of automation products that help do that. So right at the beginning, with our MyCloud platform, whether that's near zero downtime migration, so we look at doing migrations for systems while they're technically still up, we will move static data in advance. Whether we're looking at integration discovery, so quite often, and I'm sure you suffer from this in places as well, knowing what is connected to what and how that is talking to another system, again, can be complex. We have discovery agents that not look only at system interfaces, system asset registers and system versions, and can build all of that, but actually build that into an automated tool so that dynamically maps your SAP connectivity landscape. Then move on to service automation. As I mentioned earlier, things like DevOps and SysOps, near zero downtime patching. Areas like that drive large amounts of benefit because the cost of downtime in most organizations is significant. And if you can patch and maintain systems, with just a few minutes downtime in a maintenance window at a weekend, that can drive a lot of business value back in by removing downtime. Then we look at areas like backup and recovery. Again, by themselves, quite general topics. When applied into this instance, they become tools. A backup image can be used to build a new system incredibly quickly, as I'll show you a little bit later. That's coupled with a migrate methodology, and we can then look at integration, workload management, and commercial governance frameworks around that as well. And I'll show you a little bit more about that a little later on. But with that, let me hand you over to Ian, who's the head of business systems at Cambridge University Press, to tell you about that story.
Thank you very much. Hi, everybody. Good morning, evening, afternoon, whichever it is somewhere. Just get the control of these slides and I can start talking. So here we go. So about Cambridge University Press then. We are part and parcel of the University of Cambridge. So we are the third leg of the Cambridge University body, as it were. We were actually founded in 1534 by Henry VIII. So we are the world's official oldest publisher. I don't think we still use the same processes, but yeah, sometimes you look at the history of it and you're just staggered by how old and how long this has been around. We have original versions of Isaac Newton's books sat in our museum and things like that. Currently, though, we publish over 50,000 titles, and we are the second largest academic publisher in the world. We don't say it very loudly, but Oxford University are the largest. We're the second largest, we're just the oldest. We are a charity which delivers funding back to the university. And we've been a significant user of SAP since about 2012, when we started on our phase AB to get our finance stuff in place. And we are an AWS enterprise customer. I'm not, you'll be pleased to hear, going to go into a massive amount of talking about every little box on this particular diagram. mainly just to say that it was a complex environment that we had. I'm sure others are bigger and more complex, but for us, which is a small university press, it was pretty complex and hard to manage and costing us an awful lot of money. And it was how we migrated this complex environment and put it into the cloud off of what was our standard data center type operation that we were involved with Lemongrass with. We were taking the migration approach, so going through all this looking at the specific business issues and system issues, what we could do to optimize, what the governance and design, how we end-to-end monitored, and the automation roadmap, as Ben pointed out. You can't do this manually very quickly, and I'll point out later that we had to do it quite quickly. But we got into a detailed architecture design and how we planned all our migration, and then the post-migration optimization as well. All this hand in hand with Lemongrass, so it was kind of key. The migration plan was pretty tight, so we had 3 months from firing the start gun, if you like. We chose Lemongrass as our supplier, and they were straight into a 3-month migration project with a go-live date of August last year, which was kind of scary for everybody involved when we first started looking at it, but it came out well, and the outcomes we were looking for, as everybody does with the migration to AWS, a substantial cost reduction of over 50% is the target. We've actually been hitting that. We wanted it to be self-funding in the first year. We wanted to be able to have convincing disaster recovery. Hold my head, hang it in shame to say, yeah, we kind of knew we could recover from a disaster, but fingers crossed we would never have one. And we wanted it to be agile with business as usual delivery. As I said, migration in less than 3 months. And the other key thing was a minimum disruption to the business and the projects. We didn't want to have to take our SAP estate down for like a week, 10 days while we migrated it. And then also looking forward, getting into progressive automation, as it says there. We had over 60 SAP servers, and our key SAP products included FICO, supply chain, SD, and BOPPM. We are in the middle of a major global deployment. So when we started looking at this, we had deployed SAP to our US and UK centers. We were just kicking off our Iberia migration for Spain, Portugal, and we are still kicking off Asia and then Australia for next year as well. So we chose to do this in the middle of a big global rollout. We had agreed that it was going to be an all-in AWS strategy. That was where we wanted to be, not just for SAP, but we had a plan to migrate a lot of our other systems as far as we could into AWS. But the other great one, just to put more pressure on us as we started, was we had served notice on our data center provider of 3 months. And if we missed our go live date, it would have cost us another year's licensing and hosting costs, which we didn't want to do because that was a fair sum of money, as I'm sure you can imagine. Focus is the mind when you do that. Automation was the only way, absolutely. We had 3 months to do it. We couldn't fiddle around doing manual things. Automation was the only way we could go. Lemongrass had a whole series of tools, as Ben pointed out earlier, and enabled us to do this. So looking at the investigation of what we had, the migration of devs and QAS and all those things, getting it automated and moving was key to the success. And as it says there were 13 different SAP products that we were moving across, everything from ERP through to BPC. So it wasn't just a simple lift and shift, as it were. So CUP benefits realized. We successfully hit our August deadlines. So one of the first benefits was we didn't actually have to fork out for another year's hosting costs with our own data center provider that we'd used before. And we have seen a 50% or thereabouts cost reduction in our hosting and running costs. We are able to schedule and control uptimes for key production servers, as it says there, which is great. not just SAP, but other systems as well. We have a big royalty system. We're obviously a publishing company. We have to pay royalties to our authors. Once a month, we run a very data-intensive accrual job run, which we just fire up 3 extra servers to do that for the 3 days that it takes, and then we shut them off after that, and it just runs in the background as a normal sort of day-to-day operation. That's really key, and doing that automatically, we don't have to worry about doing it. Switching off dev servers when not needed. AWS obviously gives you a great facility to fire up instances whenever you want. We're not a true DevOps operation, but as I'm sure you all know, developers are great at switching on servers. They're not necessarily brilliant at switching them off. So we make sure that we schedule and switch off dev servers when they're not needed. The AWS console information does help you look at the costs and where you're going, and the cost explorer piece is really, really useful, and highlighting where, okay, would reserved instances be useful and things like that. We can actually provision systems faster. If we want to fire up a new SAP development instance to help us with our Asia rollout, we can. It doesn't take a week and a half, it takes a couple of days, and that gives us there, and the project can get moving faster. And we can progressively automate all these things as well. I did say that I hung my head in shame around our DR, but we have now, I can keep my chin up now because we've demonstrably demonstrated a successful DR test where we brought up a new SAP instance and tested everything through that it worked, and including the data checks to where we had taken a cut of the data before. From our users' point of view, the availability and performance, and combined with that, as it says there, ability to boost servers has been hugely impressive and well received by the press business as a whole. Nobody ever says, yeah, the system is too fast. They always say, yeah, it's a bit slow. But by being able to boost it during times of busy periods and things like that, it's done, and running on AWS servers that we can up and down as needed, scale as needed, has been a huge boon to us. And we don't get anybody saying it's a bit slow anymore. We don't get anybody saying it's too fast, but we don't get people saying it's too slow. So it's been a huge benefit to us on that one. So on that note, I'll hand back to Ben to talk about the automation future, and just say thank you for listening to me go on. And yeah, it's been an interesting journey, but I would say it's been an excellent journey. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. So what I'd like to run you through now is just a little bit about the automation future, and get off PowerPoint and actually show you some recordings of some of the operations of some of the solutions that we've been talking about here. So when we look at the services and innovation map, for us in Lemongrass, it falls into 4 key areas I mentioned earlier. We have automation strategies that sit across all 4 of these areas. So whether that's on preparation, so areas like technical preparation, things like a landing zone. So every time you put a new SAP environment in, or you're putting a new server in, you need to think about networks, you need to think about security groups, you need to think about segmenting maybe your production and non-production systems, and maybe your non-production and production from your disaster recovery systems. There's quite a lot of work involved in building the landing zone for those systems to go into, making sure that's security hardened, and making sure that the right security parameters have been applied to that. So that's something that we ourselves experienced building systems to begin with in the early days, and quickly identified that as an area for automation. So typically that took us, even as experts, around 10 to 15 days. With an automation script, we've now got that down to under a day to build a basic landing zone. So that's an example of where preparation and the discovery agents that I spoke about earlier, that seek out and understand the customer's environment, look at versions, look at platforms, look at interfaces, look at shares, look at connected environments, really simplifies and removes the human error around preparing and discovering the landscape itself. The migration is always a key one, and especially as you heard Ian talking about there, moving all of those systems in the timescale just isn't possible with the click with human hands. So for that reason, the migration itself was vastly automated when looking at migrating the systems over. As I mentioned before, we have new technology coming out where we can effectively start migrating systems while they're still running. If you look at a a typical database with that static data element I mentioned earlier, most of that data can be moved in advance while the system up, which means then that when you actually come to your cutover weekend, you only need to move the remaining dynamic data. So that allows a huge amount of optimization when you're looking at that all-important switchover window to minimize the business downtime for the migration. Really important. Operations, operate, that's really the meat of where we've seen most organizations save money. Key areas, if I would call out a few, things like near zero downtime patching, and I'll show you this shortly. So the ability to patch not only HANA or SAP systems, but also the operating system with very minimal downtime, just a few minutes of downtime switching over between alternate systems. That automation has been particularly key, given that you don't need technical skills to do it in an automated environment anyway. The interface means that even your grandmother can drive it, as I'll show you shortly. That then extends to other areas. So then we're looking at data ops, so especially in this world of GDRP and other areas, making sure that the auditability around where the data is going, who's had access to the data, who's done what to the data. Again, automation around data management, data lifecycle management is dead important. And then the FinOps piece, as Ian mentioned as well, very useful to keep a very myopic eye on where your costs are going. People tend to get very excited, as Ian mentioned earlier, with people turning systems on. So making sure you've got control on that flexibility and that you're flexing down as well as flexing up is dead important. Now, the composite of all of that is more time then to focus on the innovate area. So we're seeing a number of organizations now, as I mentioned, looking at data lakes. So we have some pre-canned data lake architecture models that are developed, or the DevOps world, which I'll show you shortly, the ability then to provision, move, create, refresh, and update SAP systems on demand. So this is an example of that on the screen. So this is actually taken from a couple of customers that are actually doing this now. And if you think of a typical SAP landscape, it's an upside down, it's a pyramid. So at the top, you've got obviously your dev, your QA, your production systems, your release to production. They tend to be on most of the time. They're your fix on fail systems if something, heaven forbid, happens in the production system. Then what you tend to get under that is then a large proliferation of non-production systems. So things like sandboxes, or things like project release tracks, or things like multiple projects you've got doing things for opcos or upgrades or business changes where you need those system environments for different project teams, or for simple things like training. Now, these systems tend to sprawl and grow over time. And what we tend to see in most organizations is a lot of time and money is spent then maintaining those systems, making sure that they're kept updated. There's nothing worse than doing development on a copy of production that's 6 months old than to find it doesn't fit. And also then the cost then of the basis people then associated with making sure those solutions are operated, backed up and maintained so they can be used. So what this concept says is with automation now with these organizations, they build these systems on demand. So what our automation technology does, and again, I'll show you shortly, is it's able to take a copy of a production system in real time, and then from that, build that into an isolated network. And that can be on a different version of SAP. It can be a different host name. It can be a different SID. It can be in a different network. So all the interfaces are blunted off, and there's no danger of any interfaces triggering when they shouldn't. Now, we've got that down to around about half an hour, depending on the size of the system. So it fundamentally changes the way organizations can think about running SAP. Rather than provisioning maybe a cycle time of maybe 3-4 weeks plus to implement infrastructure, build networks, get systems ready for project teams, this can now be brought down to inside one day. So it really means that the speed then from requiring a system to having a system up and running can comfortably be inside 24 hours. And then when you're finished with it, you know that's been the latest version of production. So that release will then flow back into the BAU, into the development system, flow through to production safely, and you simply turn that system off afterwards. They're almost disposable in nature. So a lot of organizations are now leveraging this to almost remove all of those non-production release landscapes and move into a DevOps on-demand model for building SAP solutions. Remember, in the world of Amazon, a server is just a few lines of code. So it really does remove all of the prerequisites typically required with setting systems up and getting them running. So what I'd like to do is show you a pre-recording here of one of our systems we recorded just a little earlier that takes you through that. Oop. Just trigger the video. Yeah, could someone with a control click on the video for me there? Here we go, mapping. So here we are logging on to one of the DevOps systems I was talking about. So I'm just logging in here. And what we're going to do is we're going to build a HANA cluster. So we're going to click on here on a new HANA cluster. And what I can do here is specify the amount of memory that I'm looking for. So let me put in a terabyte here. And you can see underneath here, the list is automatically sorting to all of the SAP certified images that Adam talked about earlier that can be used. I can even limit the number of host names on there as well. So I can actually look at the available systems as well. So I can look at then the actual generation of the server and the family. So we can see here, this is an X1E large, and I can see the information on that particular system. If I want to go and check out the information on that, okay, that's fine. I can then look at the system parameters as well. So I can see the amount of memory on the system. I can look at the vCPUs. I can look at the compute units. And I can select then how I want to use that system. Is that DevOps, maybe something like testing or training? And I can look at the metrics on that. We can see that's 16 cents an hour. And I can see that's certified for DevOps use. I can look at development and test systems. And again, you saw the list change to the SAP certification. There's the Nitrous certification for the new systems. I can see the price for that as well. And then I can see, again, that's certified for storage. So that's absolutely fine for development and test use. Or finally, production. And I can see there that these are my production certified images by SAP. And I can see then that the compute and the storage is absolutely certified for productive use. Very important to make sure that's supported and the information associated with that as well. So we'll just go back to development and test. And then on the right here, I can select whether I want this on one site, 2 sites, or 3 sites. So that's 3 data centers, 3 availability zones. I can choose between that and obviously better SLAs for the application depending on the number of data centers or availability zones involved there. So you can see if I select on 3, there's 3 of those larger systems. So if we come back to 2, and I will select then on the R4 large here, it then gives me the option to go through and look at that, and I can see the summary. I can see then all the reference architecture behind that is already pre-built. And again, that would be a manual piece of work to build these systems to begin with if you were doing this in manual world. So I can see we're using a GP2 disk here, which is certified. Also gives me live pricing information as well. This is pricing right now in the Oregon region, exactly what the pricing breakdown is to buy that. And there's different ways of buying things in Amazon, whether that's on demand or whether I'm going to buy this all up front or reserve part of this. There's different ways that I can do that. So I can look at doing that. So I can then choose the most effective way and give it a host name. So here I can choose my host name for my system. So we'll put in demo host. I can choose the version of HANA. There you go. So I can select 201. Okay. 203. I can select the patch level 2.31. So that's the latest and greatest version. I can choose the SID of the system. So let's just choose a demo SID and the backup schedule. And actually there's another area in this tool where I can actually define my own backup schedule to say, how long do I want it retended for? How long do I want that backup to be maintained? The environment specifies this is a demo environment, but could be, for example, a dev or a sandbox environment, depending on what I want it to be in, or a production system. And I can select the data center. So here in Oregon, there are 3 availability zones in the area. So we'll select A, and then choose a system password. And that could be anything you like. And we can put password policies in as well. Confirms the princely sum of 9 cents an hour to run that cluster. Press go, and that is now building my cluster live. Through the magic of editing, we should fast forward 22 minutes. There we go. And we can now see that that cluster is built. And it did actually take 22 minutes. I timed it. And we can see that is now up and running. So that's built, as you can see here, 2 HANA servers in 2 different availability zones with live replication running between them, clustered. We can see the main server, the index servers there running between those 2 regions live. So there's a proper production scale out region. So I can do things on here through the administration console. So I can actually scale up, change to different sizes. I can patch the system live. So if I want to change to another HANA version, okay, so we'll just down version here to maybe an earlier version of HANA. We can go up or down. I can patch the operating system to the latest version, and I can even change the location. So I can move that to a different data center. So if you look at what that automation is doing, it's changing the version, patching the operating system, and doing a data center migration at the same time. That takes about 20 to 30 minutes as well to do all of that in a single task as well. So we talk about sysops. This is exactly what we're talking about with automation. No technical skills required. Let's come in and look at one of these nodes. We're looking at demo host A. I can see live pass-through information about the health of the system. This is being live and monitored. So I can see the health of HANA. It's not doing very much because it's an empty box, but you can see the wobble there as the systems were setting up for the first time, and then they're stabilizing down. The audit, so again, for compliance reason, a full audit of the system, everything that has happened to that system since I created it. And you can see right from the bottom there, as we go down since launching it, right up to the system finished building there. The actual build took about 12 minutes, and then the cluster replication on top took the remaining 10 minutes to get that completed. So it gives you an idea then of the timescale involved. I've got other options. I can back a system up on demand. I can restart the system. If I want to, I can do a point-in-time recovery. So I can actually, if the system is up and running for a longer period, select an earlier date and then roll back to that point in time. So if you think of something like a cutover rehearsal, I can do my cutover, rock back to the previous version and do it again. So I can reset, maybe do that multiple times in one day. This is where we can configure the start and stop, as Ian spoke about. I can build my own schedule when I want the system to be up or down. Maybe that's over weekends, maybe that's nightly. There's different ways that you can configure that around your business requirements. And then other options around scaling the system up or doing operating system patches. We've even got an auto idle stop there. So if you're not using it, it turns off. As we mentioned earlier, it's just to stop people spinning up too many systems, and various options then to spin up equivalent systems or backup-based systems. So number of different ways that you can see automation can be driven. If we look at a backup here, as I mentioned earlier, and we pick on a HANA backup image, so let's say this is a backup of my production system last night, this is actually now a tool. So I can actually go and look at the option to now create a new copy from that backup image. So again, because this is a DevOps world, I can give it a new host name. I don't have to restore the equivalent version and then run it again. I can change the SID of the system. I can give it a new database identity. And again, I can even change the HANA version. So again, this is from a backup image, and I can build a new version onto a different version. Again, this is doing a technical upgrade from a backup version. I can change the backup schedule. I can change the environment. Let's say this went into a sandbox environment because it was a copy of production originally. And I can even change the data center. So we can pick an alternate location. I've then got the option to then look at different ways of restoring this. So if this is a production backup, it's likely this would be running in a 2 or 3 site cluster. But if it's going to be used for something like a project, I'd probably want to restore it into a single site. I don't need a big cluster. And I probably want to maybe look at a more optimal size. So I can pick a smaller size system, confirm that cost, press OK, and then straight away that is building a brand new system from the backup image of that production system and building it into the parameters that we selected into a new version of HANA, into new data center. So you can see how powerful it is that tasks that typically took weeks and maybe even months to generate and get up and running, now you can click through and do it. And as I promised, no technical skills required, and I'm pretty sure I could teach anyone who can drive a mouse to be able to do what were typically quite complex tasks that required in-depth basis administration tasks. So a little preview there of some of the tools and operations that are possible with the world of automation. Now this last screen here, this is just a preview screenshot here of our FinOps tool. And as Ian mentioned earlier, this is something we give to all customers, and it allows you to log in on your phone at any point in time. It's updated every 30 minutes, and you can see by individual systems or by individual projects or by individual environments, and that would be completely configured around the way your business runs. This is based on AWS tagging structures, each individual cost. So what you can see there on the fourth box to the right, the fourth iPhone image, is then a budget line. So that's what we think we're going to spend based on the predicted use of the system. So maybe the production systems are all the time, but maybe the non-production systems we're going to run 10 by 5, and we think we're going to run some sandbox systems a few days a week. We can set a budget line. And then on that last cost per day view, you can actually see there, that's what we like to see, a bit of a wobbly line. That's a heartbeat. Flat line means you're dead. Doesn't mean you're using the cloud properly, it means you're running it in a hosting mindset. We like to see a wobbly line there, because that means you're turning systems on and off and leveraging the benefits that cloud optimization can give you. So that's really nice, in that you get daily visibility on exactly what you're spending and give you the chance to then go and take a look at what's driving costs and then influence that on the same day that those costs come through, which is a very different way of thinking over typical methodology thinking of, I've bought a server and now I've got to depreciate it. You can influence that straight away. Also, because Amazon, this is Amazon, I think to date, and correct me if I'm wrong, Adam, but I think there's been 66 price reductions to date on those systems. And as you saw, the 5 series servers offered a 26% saving on some of those images for systems that were more powerful. And again, you'd have instant access to moving onto those systems straight away with the features and tools that I've just shown you. So I hope that's given you a good overview about some of the automation that is possible and what's coming down the pipe with some of the new releases that we've got. Any more questions, please feel free to type those into the box. But with that, let me hand back to Adam.
Thank you very much, Ben, and thank you, Ian, for your section as well. Okay, so we have got a few questions. We've got a few minutes left, so if you've got any more questions, please do add them in. So the first question we've got, and it's one for you, Ben, is you sort of touched on this earlier on. Do I need any technical or SAP basis skills to leverage the automation build tools?
Yeah, it's a good question. So as you saw from the demo there, we've really built the UI on that to be point and click friendly. And in fact, even if you're down at the Amazon console level, again, those screens can be customized. So the answer is no. You really need someone that's accountable and knows what they're doing from the business calendar to be able to drive those tools and maybe schedule up and down times or schedule when systems are provisioning. We can also put workflows in that. So maybe someone could request a system, but maybe somebody else needs to sign it off. But from a technical perspective, other than knowing the basics around the size of box you need and the environments that you need, you don't need any hands-on experience to be able to drive the tools.
Excellent, thank you. And another question is, are these systems built in my AWS account or in a provided AWS account?
Okay, so there's a couple of options there. So typically what we will do is build these in a reserved instance in the customer's name. So we can manage it on your behalf if that's an easier thing to do. But equally, if you have an AWS account already and would like to continue using that, there's no problem at all. One of the key differences with all of these tools is they are designed to be decoupled. They run in native Amazon technologies. So if they need to be decoupled and moved into other environments, absolutely no problem at all running through either our pair account or through a customer's pair account. It's compatible with both models.
Thanks.
Certainly, just to add that, Cambridge University runs it in their own AWS account, so absolutely no problem from our side on that one.
Thank you, Ian. Another question related to the billing mobile application is, I can see the prices per project or per system. How can these be broken down for reporting?
Yeah, good question. As I mentioned earlier, it's quite a personal area actually. So it very much depends on how you want to see the individual billing area. So most things in Amazon are driven by tagging structures. So that basically means every resource or asset or combined asset together, let's say it's a server combined with storage, can be tagged appropriately. So maybe that tag could be, Ben owns it and he's doing it for a personal project. And this is the PO code associated with that. It's running SAP, and that happens to be SAP ECC6. So that could then be reported up into the tool that you could see Ben's project, and his expected budget is, let's say, $500 to run that system for a few days over a couple of months. And you can get the granularity based on that tagging structure. So we've got tooling that can actually help you with that. So we've got actually some predefined governance models that are best practice with tagging that are quite suitable for SAP projects. Or you can work with us and work on your own tagging structure, and that can be implemented in the tool. So what the tool's reading is that personalized structure view rather than anything preset. So very configurable from that perspective.
That's great, thank you. And another question coming in, are these automated builds using Amazon machine images or from the real SAP installation media?
Oh, that's a good one. So that's a very interesting area because we thought about and took a look at that. But if you think about it, if you're building an Amazon machine image, so that's basically a vanilla system that you've built, basically take a snapshot, freeze that, and then use that image to basically spawn copies off. The challenge of that, certainly in SAP systems, is there are always patches and updates and OSS notes and then critical changes coming through. So that would mean then you've got to maintain a library of systems, and every time a change came out, that would need to be maintained. It would also mean that some of the things that I showed earlier then with building a system and maybe moving it to a different copy or a different version, maybe for upversioning HANA, it stops that sort of automation being possible. So actually what the automation technology is doing is it's building a new system every time based on the parameters you select, and then rolling the current live system into it. So it gets the replication up, synchronizes the database, makes sure everything's good, and then basically switches the access IP record over, so then that the end user then just seamlessly switches across to the new system. So it's a far better way of doing it.
That's great, thank you, Ben. 2 more questions coming in. Okay, can this tool you've described work with the new EC2 bare metal instances described earlier on?
So the Nitro systems that got launched at Sapphire, so the slumps earlier. Yes. Obviously we've got a good relationship with you, so we knew those were coming out a little bit in advance. So actually the tooling that I've just demonstrated on the screen, we have tested, and it does actually work with those new Nitro images. So even if they're bare metal, by the way, the provisioning automation actually still works with those newer versions. No problem at all.
Excellent, great. And one more question is, can I leverage these automation tools with new AWS platform releases?
Yeah, so the way the tools have been written, that is all using either native SAP technology, so SAP APIs is how we're doing that, and of course native Amazon solutions. In fact, that entire solution I just showed runs on Amazon. So the C5 example that you showed earlier was a good one, or maybe some new storage coming through. So again, using that technology, it's very easy for us to then provision and switch to new types of server technology. Again, what the system is doing is reading back these things like the pricing, and you saw the system lists. It's reading that back from Amazon and then presenting the available technology. So pretty much as soon as a new solution is ready, we've just got to run a little bit of testing, and we can typically roll into that within the same month, no problem at all.
Excellent, great. So that's it for questions. So finally, I'd say to everybody, thank you very much for attending. I hope you found it information very useful. We will send out a copy of the webinar via email later on. So thank you very much. And at that point, we'll end the webinar for today.